Hey, Paul.
Hey Fab, how you doing?
Good. First show on the other side of the 100 episodes. Let's do it thematic. The holiday seasons, well, by the time we publish this here, like the holidays will be in full swing. So Thanksgiving in the States and all the way up to Christmas and Hanukkah and all these other things. I know Diwali just passed. So, but, clearly there is a slump during the holidays. People do take off. It's probably a bit worse than during the summer holidays because summer is like inconsistent, right? Some people take off at the beginning of summer, middle, but holidays people tend to like kind of generally collectively shut down, and numbers do show that obviously nobody's signing a contract on December 25th type of thing. So I have a few opinions, especially on the marketing side, but get your point of view on how to prepare this holiday slump. I mean, obviously the big one, which is you always say, right, is if you have a full pipeline, it doesn't really necessarily matter that somebody's closing before Christmas because your pipeline's already full, your quota is probably already attained. It's obviously too late to get for that unless you have a very quick sales process. So assuming your pipeline is what it is, how can we best prepare for the holiday slump in your mind?
Well, it's interesting. It's an interesting question, Fab, and I think what it is, it's a state of mind too, right? During the holidays, people's state of mind changes. Think of yourself, you think more of, whatever, your family and all these things. So I think there's actually, to be opportunistic, I think there's actually some opportunities to speak to people who are in a different state of mind. One, you're right that they might not be signing contracts or whatnot, but sometimes they're more open to talking. So you can warm up, or if you're in that mid-cycle, it's a good time to talk to people. If you're in a long enterprise type cycle, it's a good time to just have a chat with people. If you're really trying to hard close business, there is definitely a different mindset going on. I agree. And you're right that I'm going to say that to you, if your pipeline is full, if you're doing everything you can in the other opportunistic times of the year, your pipeline should be full, and you shouldn't be in a panic around holiday season, sales wise. Now, being a salesperson and, self-admittedly not always the most organized person in the world, you do get to a point where you're like, oh, what's going on? Well, these are things that they're out of your control. Remember, we talked about that before. You should only deal with the things that are in your control. So what can you do? Well, you can keep making phone calls, but you have to be expectant of the fact that people might have a different reaction. But you need to keep doing the normal things that you're doing. So you're prospecting, but just know that there'll be maybe a different approach.
Right.
People saying, well, people like to push off cold calls and they like to push off cold emails and cold LinkedIn. So they'll use the holiday excuse. Oh, talk to me in January.
Yeah.
Let's take a roundabout number. 50% of them are probably telling the truth. The other 50% are just blowing you off. They maybe in the summer they would blow you off differently. Oh, I'm going on summer holidays. In the spring it'd be so. Just be realistic as to what's going on. Know that there's a certain amount of population that don't really want your services, or maybe they need them, but they don't want them. And because of that, they're going to blow you off at any time, and they're going to blow you off subtly because most people don't outright say no to you. So it's just an extra excuse during the holidays. But you have to either be able to surmount that objection or find out why they're saying these things, or you have to move on. But you're right. It's a pipeline thing, but just be ready for it,
Yeah.
Be ready for it, and don't expect the same kind of results that you might get another time of year. However, some people, it's business as usual. And if you fall in those people, well, then it's all good. So don't make any assumptions, basically. Keep working. Don't make any assumptions.
That's good, because you're right. So first of all, while the majority of people, let's talk about North America. Obviously, the whole world is very different. But although most people do shut down or whatever, I mean, some businesses are. I've worked at companies early on in my career where it was, other than the mandatory holidays, like everything was business as usual. But yeah, things tend to be slower. There's office celebrations, but I think you're right. I think part of it is also set your personal expectations and your boss's expectation, or if you're the leader, set correct expectations. But you're right, it is a state of mind, and some businesses do operate. I think, though, there's also a side on the sales reps where you also have to be realistic, right? If somebody agrees to a meeting, especially let's say a closing meeting, because you're trying to book your business for the end of the quarter and the end of the year on December 24th, there's a fairly good chance that might get postponed, right? Like as people are, like in November, people are like, December is great. It's more quiet. I'm definitely going to take that meeting. And then, December 20th rolls around and they're like, the office is in celebration mode and in vacation or holiday mode. And that meeting gets postponed. So I think you also have to be a little conscious of that and try to not schedule meetings around the core holidays, maybe move it a bit before or a bit after. And I think as a sales leader, you also need to look at, your sales reps. You always should be looking at your sales reps pipeline and forecast. But, if you're starting that a few deals are set to close on, December 31st, because like by default, like the CRM set it for December 31st, I think you have to just have a serious conversation with that rep to make sure, like, is this legit? Like, what are the odds of it actually closing on that date as a company, as a holiday? I don't know about the States, but here in North America and Canada, like a lot of companies like in the media space or marketing space, like they just fully close the office during that week between Christmas and New Year's. So you just have to make sure as a sales leader that date is valid and legit and not just added in by default.
And that's very true. I mean, as a sales leader, you need to make sure that your let's say newly acquired representatives are living in the real world. As a sales VP, you got to make sure that you understand where the forecasts are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
The higher you get, I've never mentioned this before, but the higher you get in an organization, so the more people you have reporting to you, the more you need to look at past statistics to see what's going on.
Past statistics, yeah.
That's really interesting because when you're in a company and you're dealing with many employees or many representatives, you can look at the trends of how the spends have been in the past, and you can pretty much bank on those trends unless there's something majorly different that's happened or you've released a new product or a new service, and you can get a good feeling for how sales are going to happen. From my past world in media, I could literally forecast a year ahead based on what we had done in the first few months, based on the proration of and using the ratios that I had in the past to look at what was coming forward. So if let's sorry, I'm throwing a lot of numbers out here. I'll be more specific. So let's say last year in December you closed $10 million. And this year in September, you closed 15 million, and last year you closed 10 million. Well, then, you're 33% ahead or 50% ahead. Well, depending how you look at it. What is it that what is it that you did? What's going on? So does that mean that this year in December, you'll be 50% ahead, which means you'll close, 15 million as well? So those are the extrapolations. But if you have $20 million in the pipeline and everyone's saying, oh yeah, we're going to hit 20, then you need to have those conversations, say, okay, where is this coming from? Is this realistic? So the bigger the numbers, which is great, you can look at stats and look at trends and really base yourself on the trends. But if you're talking about a small team and individuals, you need to make sure that they're realistic in what they're doing, particularly with new people that haven't lived through the slumps of sales. Because you're right. What happens at this time of year in holidays is the objections go up.
Yeah.
Yes, the objections go up, and the excuses that you can use to slow things down go up. Yeah. So that's okay. You're not going to blame the customer you're trying to sell to. It's a reality. They might have more on their plate. They may not even have thought about it when they told you in September, call me mid-December, because they didn't think of everything that was going to roll up. Right. Their company might be closing down for a week and they didn't realize it, and there's certain operational things they have to take care of. So it might be legit that they don't have time in January. But you need to understand these things. You need to understand those trends.
Right.
But usually, if you're lucky enough to have a large enough force, then you sort of know, you can look at the trend that you've been going with this year and pretty much extrapolate to what goes on during the holidays, unless you had some big blip in the past years. But if you're looking at a few years, the numbers over a few years, you can get a really good idea of what's going on.
Right. And so if we kind of flip the page to marketing for a bit, because obviously marketing is a slightly different beast, but I think if you're kind of still in a kind of lead generation type of mode for marketing, I think that goes hand in hand with sales performance, right? Like the number of leads will go down. Although there are some spikes sometimes, right? As people kind of like slow down their schedule, they're more active online, they're more searching, but they tend to also be quite aspirational, right? Oh, next year, we're going to completely relaunch our whole CRM. So then they're like actively looking for like new CRMs and stuff like that. and sometimes those deals don't necessarily pan out the way they, because at the end of the year and the beginning of the year, people tend to be very like full of hopes and dreams, and so, but so your leads can actually go up, but I think you still have to be, like you said, if you're a large enough organization, look at historical data to really set appropriate expectations. That said, if you're more in a kind of a demand generation point of view, I think there's that opportunity. And I know we talked about this, I don't know, last year, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, but I'm a strong believer, not a good practicer, so definitely as I do as I say, not as I do, but of being much more consistent with your messaging during the holidays. I think a lot of companies, because they shut down, because they're low, because a lot of people take time off, their social postings, their blog posts, their podcasts, and all that all kind of dwindle off for 3 weeks, 2-3 weeks, 4 weeks sometimes, and I think that's a big mistake for marketers. I think I'm not advocating working, like if you just schedule your podcast to go out on Saturday and that happens to be Christmas morning, I'm not advocating working on Christmas morning. You can schedule a lot of these things out, but I would definitely take, this time of year, the mid-November when we're recording this, to plan out my end of December, early January marketing initiatives, because like I said, I'm a strong believer of still being very consistent in your messaging during the holidays.
Well, you said two things there that I think are really important, is that most people in North America, whether we'd like to admit it or not, when they're on a holiday, it's actually the time they often take more time to go look at marketing material. They take more time to look at their LinkedIn. So I 100% believe you. And the content probably goes down. So your opportunity is much bigger. That's a really good point. I hadn't thought of that, but I just think of myself, and it's true that I'm doing more of it during that time of year. And I hate to say it, but I think launching your post on Christmas morning might be a great idea. Think about it, because all the people, finish unwrapping the gifts, you go look at it, and the people that don't celebrate Christmas are like, well, this is a crazy, boring day. What am I going to do? I'm going to go, everything's closed, so I'm going to, go look on this. So, you know what, Fab? I think launching your thing on Christmas Day might not be a bad idea. Just before you go see the movie with the family. I have a lot of Jewish friends, and that's what they do. They go see blockbuster releases on the 25th.
Yeah.
So there's definitely there's definitely some that's a really interesting thing.
And to add to that, like one thing that I've never seen data, I've never crunched data, but I've seen results. So this is much more of a qualitative opinion, let's call it that. Is like those horrible like holiday posts, right? Like everybody has these holiday posts or holiday campaigns that are just like happy holidays, and I hate those. Like, right, first of all, those emails never work well. Those posts tend to never work well unless you have a good, nice, interesting spin on it, right? Like some companies put
unless you're selling toys.
Yeah, but then it's probably a little too late. But I think if you're, I'm not saying don't put a holiday spin on your stuff, but I feel like you said, right, a lot of people are researching, they are hopeful for next year. They all have big projects in mind for next year. They have a lot of wanting to better themselves, right? It's like for your year's celebration, they're like, I'm going to become a better leader, a better marketer, a better salesperson. So I think you could put a holiday spin on it, to make it contextual. But I definitely am a big believer of like staying away from those generic holiday campaigns. What I do think work very well is more personalized emails and you can kind of schedule those out and you can kind of template them a bit. But I think an email, like a personal email, written from your Gmail, which, like I said, you can schedule in your HubSpot or whatever, but written by the rep, like, hey, Paul, like it was really nice working with you this year, happy holidays. But no like GIF, unless that's your style, but no like marketing card and all that stuff.
I don't know if I'm a curmudgeon, Fab, but I want to talk to you about that. I find those holiday emails or posts sometimes a little bit fake and opportunistic. Like, I don't know, when someone writes me December 15th, hey, great to hang out with you, look forward, happy holidays. I don't know. I don't see it as that sincere, unless I know the person and we've had a conversation. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm saying, right? Like, because marketing is always like, first of all, like leadership is often like, let's throw out a marketing campaign, and it's like this nice image of like holiday themed image with your logo on it, and you send that off to like all your customers, and that I agree, I'm not at all a fan of. And I think what I'm saying, I think this a more individual approach to it makes more sense. But yeah, if it's like some prospect you spoke to in like February of the year and then you like never heard, yeah, that, you know, like sending a message like, hey, I hope to talk to you next year, that's a little shake. But if you have like a good customer that you have a good relationship with, or if your customer service team has good relationships with some customers and stuff like that, I think
it's
that's
personal too. So I'm also a guy from a family who's my whole family wants to start decorating the house on November 1st. I'm like going crazy. So when I get those happy holiday emails, part of me is like, oh. But you know, I'm just turning to Scrooge as an old man. But no, I think you need to. You're right. You need to play it by ear, and you need to understand those things shouldn't be just shot out as one big, you know, cannonball, you know, to everybody there. But or shotgun, I should say. But you know, some big companies will associate themselves to special causes, and that I think has a little bit of a better. It lands a little bit better when you're, you know, trying to feed people who are starving, you know, particularly up here in Canada where it's freezing, you know, and they're trying to, you know, find homes for the homeless and that thing. That to me has more value, you know, doing things that are selfless. That I have more appreciation for. But you know, it's hard to convey that in your marketing messages. But I hear what you're saying, and the overall message to what you're saying, and my takeaway, and I want to come back on that a little bit, is that there is an opportunity to put out good content end of December because there's more eyes and ears out there that are probably going to be tuned into what you're doing. And they're also in a state of mind that's a little different. So they're maybe a little bit more open to newness. And you're right, everyone wants to change. So while they're wanting to change and improve themselves, if you're sending them something that could potentially help them improve themselves, hopefully your product and services do, well, then it's like, oh yeah, that great thing that company sent me, I should take a look at it, you know. Whereas at the other time of year, maybe they're more. So you know what, I hadn't thought of that, Fab. I'm not a marketer. So
yeah, and there's less competition, right? Because most people do shut down, and you know, because everybody's busy and we tend to not always prepare, you know, our content that far in advance. Like we get there and it's like December 12th and we're like, oh, and then the holidays are coming and people are taking time off, and then sort of like, okay, well, it's easy to say like, you know what, let's just take a break. Everybody's taking a break. And that's your thing. And you share content on how you're encouraging your employees to take time off and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I think there's definitely an opportunity there to share content during the holidays. And especially if you're able to get into that, your prospect, your persona's state of mind of like improving themselves or like taking time off or whatever, I think there's value there.
And maybe that's the opportunity for the salesperson, the sales leaders, to give your prospective clients good content.
Yeah.
You know, talk to them about how you can help them in their business rather than just saying, well, I mean, it's okay to say happy holidays, but go a little further. Maybe it's a time for you to release, as an individual rep, to release those LinkedIn posts you want to do, as a manager, to encourage people to do that, as a leader, as a company leader leading a lot of people, to get people to mobilize, to understand that this time of year is one that you can you know, bring content forward and take advantage of that void between the holidays where people are actually watching more and getting less content, right? So
yeah, and I would do it now. Like obviously, I think it's also important in everything that we said that we take time off, right? I think it's a good time to take time off because business slows down in general. It's a good time to slow down because you don't come back usually to like a 300 unread email inbox, right? So I think planning all that, planning on the sales side, planning your calls, making sure your calls are happening at more reasonable date, your closing dates are more at reasonable moments, and on marketing, planning your content, you know, early off in advance so you can schedule that out and take that.
Fab, I was just kidding there saying no, don't wait, but I will challenge the people who get overloaded. There's something you need to, and this, maybe we'll do this in another episode because I know we're coming to the end. We both have a hard stop, but
yeah.
You should never be in a state where if you take some time off, you have to catch up afterwards. So that we have to discuss that. And I know a lot of people don't have that reality, but you need to talk about that. As a salesperson, it probably happens less, but you know, you really shouldn't put yourself in a state where you know, time off equates you know, catching up that stuff later. You should always be in a state where you have a little bit of leeway and a little bit of cushion. I know it's not always feasible, but you should, and it's what you keep yourself busy with, right?
Sure enough. All right, Paul. Like you said, we both have hard stops. Let's end it here. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.
Talk to you soon.